The Chrysler 300 is a storied nameplate of luxury and performance spread across three distinct eras and multiple generations. From its beginning in 1955 to its once again cancellation in 2023, it holds a special place in history and today as the banker's hot rod. This is a far too brief history of the Chrysler 300. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. I am John. The first era of the Chrysler 300 is called the Letter Series, and it begins in 1955 with the first generation as a submodel of the Series C68 Chrysler New Yorker. The first 300 is the C300, named for its use of a 300 horsepower, 5.4-liter firepower Hemi V8, Chrysler's most powerful engine, and the one used exclusively in the 300, the New Yorker, and the Imperial Newport. The car was intended for NASCAR and sold to the public to qualify for racing. Available only in a two-door hardtop, the styling was a combination of Chrysler cars from the Imperial front end, New Yorker midsection, and the rear from a Windsor. It attracted a ton of interest, but sales were only $1,725 with a retail price of about $4,100 or about $44,000 in 2022 dollars. In 1956, the car was lightly revised with new tail fins and now with two engines, a 5.8-liter V8 or a 354 cubic inch Hemi, making either 340 or 355 horsepower from a higher compression ratio, and also making the higher output engine the first American car to produce 1 horsepower per cubic inch, beating Chevy by 1 year. As the second generation, the car was now named the 300B, and both Dodge and DeSoto got versions of the car without all the luxuries, while the Hemi stayed exclusive to the 300, the Imperial, and the New Yorker as before. One interesting option was the Highway Hi-Fi phonograph player. For 1957, the now named 300C was heavily revised and adopted the new Chrysler forward-look styling, including a trapezoidal grille unique to the 300. Now available in both two-door hardtop and convertible, the fins were revised, the color list expanded, dual headlights, new torsion bar front suspension, and optional air conditioning, and the Hemi engine enlarged to 6.4 liters for 375 horsepower, with 18 limited editions, making 390 built. Prices rose to around $5,000 for the hardtop, with about 1,900 sold. In 1958, the car was now the 300D and was the last year to use the firepower Hemi, this time still a 6.4-liter but now making 380 horsepower. Along with an extensive list of standard equipment from the New Yorker, as well as updated exterior and interior color options, there was also an option for the Hemi to have a Bendix fuel injection system that raised power to 390 horsepower. These were extremely rare, with only 35 built, and terribly unreliable. With a period of economic downturn and competition from the Ford Thunderbird and new Mercury Park Lane, it sold only about 800 with its $5,173 base price. And in 1959, the 300E received Chrysler's Golden Lion Wedgehead V8, a 6.8-liter engine making approximately the same 380 horsepower as the previous engine while weighing about 100 pounds less, and was once again exclusive to the 300 and the Imperials. Well equipped with some beautiful touches, this was the last body-on-frame chassis, and with its slightly higher base price of about $5,300, only 650 were sold. The 1960 300, now designated the 300F, was dramatically revised. It moved to a unibody platform with sharper styling and outward-tilting fins and a new corporate grille. Inside, the car now had 4 bucket seats divided by a full-length console from dash to the rear seat, and the front seats swiveled. They also heavily revised the dash with the Astrodome instrument cluster positioning the gauges in 3 dimensions. Due to its size, the push-button controls for the transmission were mounted to the left of the steering wheel, with a horizontal lever below that controlled the turn signals. The tachometer had to be installed in the center console below the radio. Under the hood, there were 2 versions of the 6.8-liter Wedgehead V8. The standard Cross Ram made 375 horsepower and was tuned for low and mid-range RPMs. 2 carburetors and their air filters were mounted outboard of this engine at the fender wells. But there was also a special short ram version of the engine tuned for high RPMs, made 400 horsepower, and also got a 4-speed French manual transmission from the Facel Vega that was unfortunately unreliable. Only 15 of these were ever made. Overall sales increased to about 1,200 for the year. And then in 1961, the 300G got another restyle, notably turning the grille upside down and the quad headlights now slanted, as well as accompanying changes at the rear. The two engine options from the previous year remained, but the troublesome French manual transmission was replaced with a Chrysler-sourced heavy-duty 3-speed. Sales increased to around 1,600. For 1962, Chrysler dropped the fins for a sleek new look, moved to a shorter wheelbase and a 5-inch shorter body, but most importantly introduced the 300 Sport Series as a 2-door hardtop and eventually a 4-door sedan and convertible to replace the Chrysler Windsor. The convertible and 2-door hardtop remained with the Letter Series, this time as the 300H. On the exterior, there was little difference between the Sport and Letter Series, but inside, while the 300H kept the front and rear bucket seats and full-length center console, the Sport Series got standard bench seats front and rear. With a lighter body and frame, the 300H was faster than the previous model, but the loss of exclusivity and ever-rising prices made this a poor seller with just around 570. For the 1963 model year, Chrysler skipped the letter I and went straight to the 300J, combined with a radical redesign of the car and moving the model to the C platform. This was the last 300 styled by Virgil Exner, and it featured a cleaner look with wide C-pillars. Inside, the rear bucket seats disappeared, the Astrodome instrument cluster was eliminated, and shocking the industry, Chrysler offered a 5-year, 50,000-mile warranty. The Sport Series also continued, with the convertible 300 being dropped into the Sport and becoming the unofficial pace car for the 1963 Indy 500. Under the hood, the 6.8-liter engine was massaged for more power, and the on-steering wheel from other Chrysler products was added and limited the exterior colors to just 5. Sales were very poor, with just 400 made. In 1964, the 300K made a splash and was a sales success. The engine was massaged to make 360 horsepower, the push-button auto transmission controls became a console-mounted selector, minor trim changes were made, 17 exterior colors were now available, but importantly, the price dropped by nearly 1,000. Sales surged to over 3,600 produced. The 1965 300L was the final year of the Letter Series, and it went out with a bang. Chrysler restyled the body under new head of styling Elwood Engel, and the results were good sales of over 2,800 for the year. The panoramic windshield was abandoned, the car grew 3 inches overall and 2 inches in the wheelbase, and it continued with the hardtop and convertible options. The higher output cross-ram engines were discontinued, leaving the 360 horsepower 6.8-liter V8 with 4-barrel carbs as the only engine. For this final year, the 3-speed TorqueFlite automatic continued with a no-cost option of a 4-speed manual with Hurst shifter. Sadly, every option on the 300L could be ordered on the 300, so the only exclusivity was badging. While the 300 Letter Series ended here, development of the next generation, named the 300M, had begun. The 300M was planned to make a cosmetic changes and potentially a more powerful engine, but the development was canceled in November of 1964. In 1965, they revived the plan with a new 425 horsepower 426 Hemi, but ultimately the whole project was just canceled. The 300 non-letter series continued with the 4-door and 2-door hardtops and 2-door convertibles and a 7.2-liter V8 in 1967. The styling was revised, and in 1968, concealed headlamps were added. Between 1969 and 1970, styling was revised. 2 engines, the 440 and the 440 TNT, were offered. In 1979, the name returned briefly as a version of the Cordoba coupe. It was an over $2,000 package with special grille and emblems and a 995 horsepower version of the available 5.9-liter V8 with a 4-barrel carb, dual exhaust, and performance cams. Other improvements came from the police spec vehicles, including heavy-duty suspension and rear gear ratio. Less than 2,900 were ever built. In 1999, the 300 nameplate returned as the 300M, a derivative of the LH platform Chrysler used with the Eagle Vision, Chrysler Concorde, Chrysler LHS, Chrysler New Yorker, and the Dodge Intrepid. Now is a unibody front-wheel drive car with a longitudinally mounted 3.5-liter V6 making 255 horsepower with a 4-speed automatic with auto stick. It was originally planned as the redesigned Eagle Vision until that brand was dropped. It had gone so far that there were manuals and images developed showing the Eagle nameplate. The historic crosshair grille was dropped from the 300 as Dodge had adopted that look since the 1980s, and the car was shortened about 10 inches primarily to meet European restrictions. Mild and ongoing changes occurred throughout its lifespan, including a 300M Special with a lightly tuned engine and a Pro-Am version in 2002 with upgraded audio and two-toned interiors. In 2004, optional satellite radio and GPS navigation became available, and a Platinum Series to coincide with the 20th anniversary of the minivan. The 2004 model was its last. But in 2005, Chrysler totally revamped the 300 into a full-size car based on the LX platform. The styling direction of the new 300 was forecast with a concept car at the 2003 New York International Auto Show, referencing a modern interpretation of the 1955 C300 and taking elements from the 1998 Chrysler Kronos concept. At the time, Chrysler was merged with Daimler, and while the LX platform was U.S. designed, engineers were sent to Germany to study the upcoming Mercedes E-Class. Elements such as the safety cage architecture were derived from the E-Class, and components such as the rear suspension were taken from it, and the front suspension from an S-Class, as well as multiple other Mercedes parts such as driveshaft, ABS system, engine modules, 5-speed transmission, and more. A 2.7-liter V6 with 190 horsepower, a 3.5-liter V6 with 250, a 5.7-liter Hemi V8 and 340 horsepower. The SRT-8 model had a 6.1-liter Hemi with 425 horsepower, and there was a 3.0-liter turbo diesel V6 in overseas markets. On sale through the 2010 model year, the car was well received and became an iconic throwback to large rear-wheel drive V8 powered American cars. It's worth noting that while it was available only in a four-door body, the platform was used for the Dodge Magnum wagon as well as the Charger and Challenger with modifications, and overseas as a Lancia. And in 2011, the last generation of the 300 was released. The LX platform was entirely redesigned and updated and now known as the LD platform. Exterior styling was revised and cleaned up to look somewhat sleeker. The engine lineup was massaged, dropping the 2.7 and 3.5-liter engines and adding the new Pentastar V6 with 292 horsepower. The 5.7-liter remained, now with 363 horsepower, and notably, the SRT engine was expanded to 6.4 liters and 470 horsepower. Inside the car got a new infotainment system, standard leather on all trim levels, more airbags, and generally better quality materials. In 2015, the car got a facelift, adding many new features such as adaptive cruise, lane departure, electronic instrument cluster, and an 8-speed automatic. Sales worldwide slowly eroded, and in 2022, Stellantis announced the 300 would be discontinued after the 2023 model year and replaced eventually with an all-EV reminiscent of the Chrysler Airflow EV concept. I personally have a special place in my heart for this car. Although through its history, its combined muscle car attitude with luxury was always seemed to me many challengers to it were more luxury with a little bit of muscle. The car was innovative, and in many years they were also painfully gorgeous. It's sad to see the 300 canceled, but it is a platform that's lived well past its time and it can't hide its age. But I do expect to see it back soon. With Chrysler having such a thin lineup, as Stellantis begins to create platforms and reinvigorate both Chrysler and Dodge with new product, they'll need names, and it makes a lot of sense to me for them to look back in the history of these companies and pick those names that can strike some emotional chords with buyers. The next generation may be a 300 EV, but I'll be shocked if we don't see the name again, once more, at the top of Chrysler's lineup. Thanks for being here. A special thanks to my Patreons. If you support histories like this and independent news opinions, please show the channel some love, and be sure to check out this next video right here about a Chrysler 300 competitor. I bet you're going to like it. Thanks for being here, guys.